Okay, well, so go back to 2023. The Browns had five starting quarterbacks. Five starting quarterbacks. They lost Nick Chubb. Everybody in the state of Georgia should know how beloved and important and dynamic Nick Chubb was to the Browns. Lost Nick Chubb early in the season, week 2 on Monday Night Football. That was devastating. Their offensive weapons that year were Amari Cooper and David Njoku, and Kevin Stefanski leads that team into the playoffs. 5 different starting quarterbacks. Your offensive weapons are Amari Cooper and David Njoku, and you go to the playoffs. That is the type of coach he is. This is a guy that has done more with less his entire career. His first season as a head coach was the COVID year. He couldn't even meet his team in person. Week 1 of the season, they get blown out against the Ravens. He is steady. He is level. They come back to work. And guess what they do? They go to the playoffs and they upset the Pittsburgh Steelers in Pittsburgh and win their first playoff game in I don't know how long. The point here is that Kevin Stefanski has worked with 13 different quarterbacks, 13 different starting quarterbacks in his 6 seasons. He is a 2-time coach of the year. And yes, there was a lot that didn't go well, that didn't necessarily help him when it came to building a culture or building consistency with a quarterback, because again, there were 13 of them and there were a lot of drama that went with that. There was a lot of input in his coaching staff the last few years, and that's a little bit difficult. But you really, truly are getting a coach who is very adaptable, who is completely bought into player development, who definitely has a scheme of his own, but is not a slave to his scheme. And of all the coaches I've ever dealt with, when he says my favorite play is the play the quarterback likes, guys, he's telling the truth. That's really who he is. And if you'll give me the chance, I'd love to dispel some of the narrative that seems to be taking hold in your city. Please. Okay, so this past season, once again, I had a wonderful opportunity to be around the Browns a lot during training camp and in the preseason in my role as the preseason sideline reporter. The Browns very famously drafted 2 quarterbacks this past year, one of whom is one of the biggest celebrities this league has seen and has one of the biggest fan followings this league has seen since perhaps Tim Tebow. Kevin Stefanski came up with a very specific development plan for both of his rookie quarterbacks, Dillon Gabriel and Shedeur Sanders, and he tailored them to each of them. It wasn't just, okay, here's a plan for the rookies. It's okay, this is how we best help Dillon Gabriel. This is how we best help Shedeur Sanders. He devoted extra individual practice time every Friday and every Monday to the rookies that weren't playing. When Shedeur Sanders early in the season wasn't dressing, wasn't getting a jersey, he was getting individual one-on-one coaching time every Friday and every Monday after practice. Once he became the starter, Kevin Stefanski, even though he wasn't calling the plays, was making time for one-on-one meetings with his starting quarterback multiple times a week, as many times a week as Shedeur Sanders was in there. It is so obvious in all 13 of these quarterbacks that I've seen Kevin Stefanski with that he's got a great intentionality in calling plays to make a quarterback comfortable. So what I mean by that is if you've got a quarterback who doesn't like to throw explosives early, if he's the type of guy that wants to gain a little confidence underneath him, let's get some quick completions, let's get into a rhythm quickly, that's what Kevin's going to call. And I've seen him over the course of these last 6 years go away from some of his core principles. He likes a rhythm and timing offense. His offense is very precise. But you've got a player that maybe doesn't play to that, he'll change. He'll go away from that. And I've also seen him incorporate player input, whether it's, I've talked about this with Deshaun Watson, who will take plays to Kevin Stefanski and say, hey, I like this, and Kevin will incorporate them. And Shedeur Sanders did the same thing this year. So I think that this idea that he can't work with certain quarterbacks, just is such a fallacy. I don't really know where it comes from. And I think in the city of Atlanta especially, there's a history here that you would like to think Atlanta fans really appreciate. You know, after the killing of George Floyd, Kevin Stefanski actually went to a George Floyd protest with his his two sons and his mom. And he talked to his players about entering the arena and using your platform. Another thing I'll tell you about, Kevin, is that before the league made it mandatory to create opportunities for minority offensive coaches, he helped start such a coaching fellowship with the Browns. And I can actually name the Patriots quarterback coach. You'll see him this week, Ashton Grant. The very first coaching job that he had in the NFL was under this fellowship that Kevin Stefanski started. Israel Wilfork, who was with the Cardinals last year, he just interviewed for an offensive coordinator job, I believe, in Washington. He also, his first coaching job was under that fellowship. Wow. So you haven't met him yet, right? He hasn't had his introductory press conference, but I would really exhort you to kind of have an open mind to see who he is. Oh, you know what? And here's another one. So I've known Baker since he was drafted, and in so many ways, Baker and I are the same person. You know how they say that your best traits can also be your worst traits?
Right.
So that's it. Like, highly competitive. Yep, that's me too. Takes everything personally. Yep, that's me too. Baker loves to manufacture chips. That's who he is. And so when D. Orlando Ledbetter, what did he call him? He called him a failure? I mean,
yes.
Gee, but like my friend, D. Led, he wasn't a failure. I just told you. He led the Browns to their first playoff win in who knows how long. And then it was, you know what? Baker himself will tell you that he doesn't know that he is the same player or the same person if he didn't have to leave Cleveland, if he didn't get out of Cleveland in such a horrible way, if he didn't spend that terrible year in Carolina, if he didn't have to re-find his love. There's certainly a maturity that he has because of what he went through. But Kevin was on the record repeatedly, and I even had the conversation with him. He was very happy to continue with Baker Mayfield. He felt strongly about what he could do with Baker Mayfield. The front office decided to go in a different direction. They were really wrapped up in this pursuit of Deshaun Watson. And the way duties were divided, the way the hierarchy was in that building, Kevin Stefanski was the coach, and the front office did the front office things, did the personnel things. So while he may have had input, it's not like it was his decision to move on, but he's the best at manufacturing chips and manufacturing some fun. So, okay, those two matchups next year, they'll be also be fun, right?
It's going to be great.
Move over, Liam Cohen and Robert Saleh. You've got nothing on the NFC South now.